Hi, everybody. Welcome to, I don't know, what do we want to say? Is it an academic, a visual literacy, a research and visual episode, something like that? We'll sort of let that be the tagline, I guess. Delighted to be talking on this episode with scholar and author Sally Campbell Pirie. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Shall I call you Sally,
You
Dr.
can call
Campbell
me
Pirie?
whatever you want. Sally is great.
All right, all right. Sounds great. You're also welcome to call me Sally if you would
Okay,
like.
we'll call everybody Sally. I mean, who doesn't want to be Sally? Let's be honest.
True, very true, very true.
Very true. Mhm.
Yeah. So you've written, done comics, and take them in an academic and really interesting direction. And one of the things that I also know from sort of scrolling your Vita and looking at the things that you published is that you seem to have a couple of steps in the way of like breaking down barriers for public, for people in general,
Mhm.
the hoi polloi, the vox populi to enjoy academic
Mhm.
approaches to writing and thinking. Is
Mhm.
that accurate?
I would hope so. I mean, I think that a lot of, Gayatri Spivak said that clear prose cheats, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's this idea that our ideas are rich and important and complex, and they deserve complex language, and they deserve to take up space in that way. But something can be complex while also being clear.
Hmm,
I
hmm.
think that for our ideas to have purchase with as many people as possible, and that's part of the mission of one of the many pieces of decolonizing knowledge in the academy. In order for our work to have as purchase as many people as possible, we want to get at that complexity in a way that is clear.
Yeah.
And so that is what, when I talk about breaking down the barriers of intentionally obfuscating language in academia, that's part of what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean you can't use your fancy words. You just need to do it in a way that's not intentionally gatekeeping, which is what I think a lot of academia is. Like whenever
Yeah.
somebody throws around the word hermeneutics, I'm like, come on. If you
Yeah.
honestly know what that means, can you spell that? I just come on, stop. So that's part of what I've done. And then, I mean, I want to hope that I've done it. I don't know that I've done it. The other piece is that has been also breaking down some barriers for academics, because when I
Mm.
started doing this, I started my PhD program in 2000. And when I got to my dissertation, I said, I'm a cartoonist and a visual artist and an accomplished one, and I want to do a graphic novel for my dissertation. And my committee said, "Oh, no, 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 no,
Ah,
you can't do that. No one's done it." And so I thought, okay, well, when I get to be a grown up, I'm going to do it so that other people can say, oh, look, she did it, you know?
hmm.
And when I wrote my first, and I think I've told this story many times, but when I wrote my first comic, the first version of Shane the Lone Ethnographer, which is, do not buy that one, buy the second edition. It's much, much better. But when I wrote the first one, I was a graduate student. And I remember a faculty member, male faculty member in the department where I was, came up to me and said, oh, your cute little book is doing really well, but you're never going to get tenure on that. And I just thought, oh, mm-mm.
Yeah.
So I knew that when I got to be a full professor, I would stop doing straight work. And when I say straight work, I mean like in word, written out, his conventional prose. And with the exception of a few special projects for people I know, I haven't. And that's been great. Not that I'm like a pioneering trailblazer with my flag riding across the plains. But I think there is something useful in doing it and making it work. Because back in the day, back when I first tried to publish an article in a journal that was comics based, before that was even a term, before Marcus Weaver Hightower and Nick Susanis and Paul Kuttner came
Mhm.
along and coined that. Before that was even a term, people said they couldn't run it because there wasn't enough toner. Too much toner.
Yeah.
That was the argument that was given. And now they can't make that argument because of
Mm-mm.
digital media, but also it was a stupid specious argument and they can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more room for other people. So that's when I think about breaking down barriers. I those are kind of the two directions that I hope my work has gone in.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And the word that you use there, I'm also picturing you because I'm a visual kind of person. I'm picturing you literally like riding through a desert waving the flag. So that was a fun
Exactly.
image.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Saladin, with my flag riding across the desert, right?
That's right. That's right. You use the word useful there, which I think is so important because I just finished editing a book on phenomenology. And,
Mhm.
as you do when you're editing a book, you share things out and you want people to contribute. And I shared a call for it in a social media group. And one of the people in the group immediately jumped on, and the gist of the argument was, oh, phenomenology is it's too dense, it's too complex, it's too beautiful, it's too scholarly to possibly be used in education. And I'm going, if you have an idea that is so beautiful that it's not useful, I
It's a
don't.
gorgeous glass hammer. It
That's
is a
right.
gorgeous glass hammer, right?
That's right.
Mhm.
And if you want to decorate with glass hammers, that's fine.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, I just question that because is it really that beautiful of an idea if you can't actually use it in some
And then
way?
we get into the idea of usefulness, right? Of
Hmm.
what is useful. And then we get into the dangerous and I think exciting territory of what are we doing?
Hmm.
You know, my daughter, I've told the story before as well. My youngest daughter, Betsy, went to like it was like take your parent to school. Like, what do our parents do? Kind of thing, like first grade. And they said, oh, well, my mother's a firefighter, my dad does this, blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh, well, my mother makes truth.
I love
And
it.
we're, oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I would love to be able to say that that's correct. But the idea of what are we doing and what is the power of ideas? And part of
Mm,
kind of the last like the political paroxysms of like 2016 until very, very recently and arguably continuing and COVID and all these other things is questioning what is our relevance and our usefulness. And I think that the
mhm,
power of ideas and the sanctity of ideas, of complex ideas, and of making them useful to improve people's lives and whatever that means, whether it's liberating consciousness, whether it's giving people hope, whether it's opening up our ideas for introspection. It's more important than ever, and getting more people to participate in that work is
mhm.
better. And I think images and words, contiguous images and words, are uniquely positioned that way.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't think it's because it's easier. People say, "Oh, well, it's so much easier for you because you draw." I'm like, no, it's so much hard. I wrote a book chapter for my friend Sharon Mazzarella for there's a handbook on girlhood studies coming out, and I wrote a traditional conventional book chapter for her, and it was so lovely and
Mhm.
easy because I wasn't thinking in 10 dimensions. So anyway, I'm rambling, but you get the idea, right? There's an interesting conversation about what is use.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you mentioned the idea that drawing is easier, and I'm thinking about I've had a number of people that do comics, visual
Mhm.
work, picture books come on the podcast, and they talk about the years
Oh
that they
yeah,
spend putting together a book.
it's
Um,
exhausting.
yeah.
It's tiring in a way that I can't explain. Like the thought of just typing something, and that's work too. I don't mean to diminish the work of people who do conventional scholarship. That's work too, but it's just like I think, and people say, "Oh, well, it must be so fun," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's fun, but it's like the New York Times, Thursday puzzle. It is a cognitive task that takes a lot of time and energy. And when I'm done with a piece, the piece I did for Johnny Saldana's book after the interview and Charlie
Hmm.
Van as well, Paul Mias, I felt like, James Brown leaving the stage, like I needed a water and a cape, it was so arduous. Um, but again, the landscape of comics and comic art has changed so much since I was, in my like late teens, early 20s when I first started doing newspaper work.
Hmm.
And that's been for good and for ill in terms of how much easier it is and also how much harder it is.
Yeah, yeah, that was I think the first piece that I discovered of yours, Follow the Headlights, in the
Mhm.
After the Interview book. And when I saw that,
Yeah.
I thought, This is fascinating stuff." And that's when I reached out because you and I have a collaboration that's currently going through.
Yeah.
I should have copy edits on it in the next
Woo.
few days. So fun times, fun times. All the notes to the typesetter. It's exciting. Um, so yeah, that kind of led me to reach out to you and say, "Hey, would you mind to do something for this?" Which has been a nice collaboration as well. I would mention the name of the book that's coming, but I never really can remember the names of the books that I
It
do.
changed a couple times too. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
usually come up with really like flashy, I don't know, qual oriented.
I love a flashy title,
I
you
do
know?
too. I do
And
too.
journal
But
editors are always like, your title doesn't tell us about the article. I'm like, my title draws in the reader like bees to
mhm.
honey. Like that's what we want. We don't want a boring title about with 1,000 semicolons.
Yeah,
Nobody wants
yeah.
that. So yeah, but I love a flashy title. I wish I could remember the name of the book. I think I have the old title somewhere, but
Yeah, it's something about visual epistemology, something like that.
yeah, yeah, something
Because
like
that was the phrase that I was like, I want to use this.
it has
Um,
like a zingy thing and then a colon and then like something else. So yeah.
exactly. But
Mhm.
it's got to be good if it's got a colon
It,
and something
it's
else.
everything with a colon or with extra parentheses that you don't need. That's
That's
always a
right.
sign. It's good. Like reimagining.
That's right. That's right.
Haven't appreciated a
See,
long time.
see,
Yeah.
word parts. Yeah, yeah.
Word part. Here we go.
Yeah, very true, very true. But we do have that coming. And yeah, I wanted to ask you also about the process that you go through of, I mentioned that the people that I talk with that do graphic novels take years. One person I talked with does like 12 versions of the same page. Um, what kind of time frame goes into this?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I've had people ask me to do projects and they're like, oh, you can just draw real fast, like afternoon. I'm like, no, no. I don't know that I have the words to describe what goes into it's a very intense process for somebody who
hmm
draws funny pictures of little creatures. Like it's to come up with that thing, it takes months. And I
hmm
spend a lot of time doing work that isn't related to that work. Like I'll go to an art gallery and look for a pattern or look for a thing or just kind of take it in. Or I follow oh gosh, who was it who wrote Sarah Delamont, a hero of mine, wrote you
hmm
need to read widely. So I read and I absorb visual media widely to gather in the patterns and the images and the impulses and the things to then make an original image, which is no joke. Like it's to draw something and to make a thing, it's incredibly difficult. So I have sketchbooks and I have drawings and I do all these things and I collect the idea and I amp out on the idea and I'll lay on my bed. I actually do all my drawing laying on my stomach on my bed. That's a thing.
Oh,
Like
nice, nice.
I
I
can't
love it.
draw sitting up. I know my chiropractor loves it too. But so I'll draw and draw and draw and draw and draw until finally the thing emerges,
hmm
like from the mists, right? The thing. And then I make that part of the story. And sometimes I'll type out, if I'm working on an academic piece, especially, I'll type something out with all the citations and everything, and then think about how I want to do it. But it's largely a process of deep emotional, um, you know, sort of, it's like gold mining for gold, like just sifting through all the stuff until you find the images and the themes that you want to work with and what you want to say and what you want to say cognitively in terms of I want to communicate this message about data analysis or about the project or about whatever it is one
hmm
thing. Then also what I want to communicate with those images. I did a recent piece that it's self-published. It's on my website, sallypirie.com, about my name change. I renamed myself
hmm
as a statement of radical feminism. And I wrote a comic about it. And in it, I have these people that are cats. It's these cat headed people with these bodies that I made out of fabric that I took pictures
Oh,
of and
wow.
put in. And to get to that image and everything I wanted, those images and those body parts and those sort of the kind of 1950s McCall's pattern without people, the things I wanted that to evoke for lots of different people took months
hmm
of
hmm
drawing and sketching. So to do an academic piece, there's all of that drawing and sketching and thinking and taking visual notes and meditating. And then there's going, if I'm doing something with data, there's going through the data, which takes another several months of reading it and rereading it and figuring out what it is I want to say. Then I typically sketch out and plan out, do the storyboard with pencil and paper, not on a screen. I learned, I was trained in newspaper cartooning before we had digital anything. Like I would erase, like I had an electric eraser to get rid of the pencil lines. Like
Oh,
that's
wow, wow.
how old school it was when I was doing my weeklies. So I sketch that out and then I take pictures of it and put it on my little tablet. And then I draw on the tablet. And I usually don't get the thrill of working in color, although I love that. It's the Shane books are black and white still, because people use them as adult coloring books, and I think that that's marvelous, so I leave it.
Hmm.
But I think about the color separately, and it's this whole process. It's highly recursive, highly iterative, and in the end, I have this thing that I've made that um, is hand lettered, and that's something a lot of people don't do. I hand letter everything,
Hmm.
and that was incredibly difficult. And one of my publishers actually made me a font called Sally, so that they could use my handwriting to fix things. And it doesn't work for me. I have to be able to hand letter, even though there are mistakes, and my tablet is kind of weird and occasionally erases the last thing I did. So there's missing letters and I have to go back through and fix it. And sometimes it's illegible and spacing is weird. But that's also part of the meditative process and the economy that drives the poetry of what I'm saying. Because if you
Hmm.
have only 100 words and you have to fit them on a page and they have to be legible, and you can't type 1,000 words a minute,
Hmm. Hmm.
get it out. It's a very, very different. I'm kind of rambling, but it's a lot of different pieces. It totally, consumes me to do one of these things. And like so much art, I do it by feel,
Yeah. Yeah.
not, I mean, there's an intellectual component. I mean, I have a PhD, I'm a scholar and a theorist, but it's very emotional and very tactile and very, I told somebody once, you have to go to a place.
Right.
Sometimes it's a
Yeah.
great place and sometimes it's not, depending on what you're working on. Research in pain, it was not a great place. And I
Yeah.
cried the time I drew that. But you have to go to a place to do this work. This is not to say that other people cannot do this. Anyone can do this.
Hmm.
A foundational premise of my teaching and my work is that everyone can draw.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
have zero training. I have zero artistic training. None. Absolutely none. Except learning how to do newspaper, which is you come up with something funny and relevant and awesome every night, every Thursday night, and like walk it down the hallway to the editors. And that's what you do. And you get in the process of working under pressure and drawing a lot.
Hmm.
But I had no training. And so if I can do it, you can do it. And by saying that it's complex and you have to kind of go to this place to do the work isn't to say that other people cannot do this or they don't have the emotional or cognitive or intellectual skills to do it. It's just you have to be willing to be that kind of radically vulnerable, and you have to be willing to put in the sweat.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes art sucks. Like it is hard. Like my back freaking hurts. Like it's like the sitting at my drafting table back when I used to like do upright work for 10, 12 hours. It's physically painful.
Yeah.
And also there comes a certain point where you're not sure that the piece is going to stick. Like
Hmm.
I recently, there was a piece I was doing for my colleague Yue Zhu. He's at Nottingham. He's a wonderful, wonderful scholar in childhood. And I was going to submit a piece for a illustrated piece for a special issue around preschool, my preschool project. And I got about halfway through drawing it and I was like, this is not coming together,
Hmm. Hmm. The
you know?
imposter syndrome and the
Well, not
self-doubts.
even that, just like this is not, I have to stop
Yeah.
and put this away for a while. And so I withdrew from the special issue, and I hate doing that. But it just wasn't going to hang together. It wasn't hanging together. And that's also it, because it's a huge investment. With other
Hmm.
things, if I was to write a book chapter and it didn't run, I could massage that into a journal article. I could submit it somewhere else. But when you do an illustrated piece, there's none of that. So there's a commitment, there's a funny sunk cost thing.
Hmm.
It's arduous. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but there's
Yeah. Yeah.
we also
Absolutely.
also artists, we spend a lot of time alone. So anytime we get a chance to talk to somebody, that's deeply edifying, and we tend to overdo it.
Oh yeah, no, no, it's good and it's fascinating, and I appreciate what you're saying about it not being easy. At the same time, I imagine there's such a reward that
Oh yeah.
comes, because I mean I know the little bit that I've done, and I need to reach out to that vulnerability more so, and
Mhm.
I need to make time to practice. That's what I need to do.
That's the thing. Nobody, like, if I don't practice, if I don't sketch, if I don't draw a little bit every day, if I don't keep that sketchbook relevant, I
Yeah,
dry. There are no ideas. There's nowhere to go. The well is empty. You cannot do it. And that is the
yeah.
thing. It's like I'm also a runner. And if I stop running, like getting back on the horse is really, really hard. So kind of keeping
Hmm.
your hand in is so important. And the vulnerability is also part of that. You're like, am I really like I'm drawing? Is this, I mean, because I've drawn a lot of things that are horrible and they look like, I mean, look like a 6-year-old did it. It's awful. Um, not, and 6-year-olds normally do much better work than I do, by the way. This is not a slam on 6-year-olds, but it's, I think that vulnerability is the revolution,
Yeah.
and art keeps you there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and having the willingness to do that, absolutely. And I mean, it opens something for you in seeing something in a new way as
Mm-hmm.
well. I
And you are
remember.
transformed. You are transformed by the work.
Mhm, mhm. I remember going through the process of the first time I did an arts-based approach. It was a collage approach, and I had like 5 or 6 thematic categories in the study that I was working on. And as I was moving things around on a canvas, I realized, oh, well, really, I've only got like 3 or 4 here. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think unless you take that step back and you go through kind of a different process and a reconceptualization, I think that adds a whole other layer to the process and to what you're sharing with people.
I think there's a wonderful term for that. I don't know if you've come across it before. Is and this is from Weaver Hightower, Susanus and Kuttner.
Uh-huh.
Restoring. You heard about restoring?
Yes,
It's that
yeah.
complex thing that you're doing, and we all just sort of do it, and we're tired at the end, and we can't figure out why. But they nail it down about what that cognitive acrobatics really is, and I can't say enough about their chapter in the handbook about comic space research. It's kind of
Absolutely.
like we all read it. We're like, oh yeah, that's what I've been doing all this time. Now it has a
Yeah.
name. But yeah, it's restoring. It's that difficult turning of the thing. And what
Now,
we do is radically different from what a lot of comic artists who are telling other kinds of stories do. It's
mhm,
very, very different. And it
mhm.
presents different cognitive challenges. And that I think is captured in that concept as well.
And I think it returns to that idea of taking something complex and making it simple, of conceiving of an idea and then thinking, what does this look like visually? And even what you were talking about with the design, how does it go on a page and look comic bookian and not, that's not really a word,
Well, the
and not
affordances
lean
of
too
comic
heavily.
genre are useful, right?
Yeah, yeah. Are there
Mm-hmm.
too many words? Are there too many images? What's the relationship of those two things? How do you
Yeah,
balance
where does
that?
it look funny? Does it look wonky to you? Does it bother your eyes to look at it?
Yeah.
Something isn't right. The other thing that I think is really important, we do that calculus in our heads. A lot of us, we look at a finished work, we're like, something's not right. Like you'll know when it's right, and you can't nail it down because it's an emotional, iterative, intuitive thing.
Hmm.
I have a print. I can't remember the artist who did it. Oh, I wish I could remember. I have this print of this mermaid on my wall because I went to a mermaid conference in Denmark a few years ago, was and I wrote papers for it and it was fun. But it has this mermaid and it says shit doesn't need to make sense. And I love that
Yep.
because it doesn't need to make sense. It needs to feel authentic and feel right,
Hmm.
but it doesn't need to make sense in sort of a cognitive intellectual way. So the thing I drew for Johnny and Company, the headlights piece, had this big person with a huge ear on one page. And I love that's my favorite page of the whole thing because that's the feeling I had. And people were like, what is up with the ear, with the things? And I said, well, I just wanted to emphasize the pricking up of the ears.
Yeah.
And I had been watching the Book of Kells, that animated
Hmm.
which is fantastic. And all the people's ears have those little bands on them. And I
Uh-huh.
think that's where I got that idea for the pricking, right? The pricking of the ears. And it didn't make sense, but it felt right. It felt good. So that's, it's another piece of that making things integrous. How do I say that word? Feeling integral.
Either way, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
feeling
You said
integral.
contiguous earlier. I like the word contiguous too.
Contiguous. Yeah, that is actually the definition of a comic, the contiguous use of text and images.
I like it. I like it.
Mhm, mhm,
Everything is connected in some way.
mhm. This is true. This is very true.
I was thinking a little while ago, and I was trying to search back through my brain the thing about the vulnerability aspect of art, and I was thinking about Linda Berry and some of that work as well, and the fact that I work with high school students, I've worked with middle school students, college students. People tend to apologize for their art before they ever
Yeah.
make it. It's
Mhm.
almost like they're putting out a disclaimer to say, now this is not going to be very good.
Yeah. I am removing my vulnerability from the equation and taking no responsibility for my work.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think like if I were to start every podcast and be like, no, this is not going to be good, everybody. This is,
Yeah,
or,
no, this is gonna suck. Like everything is stupid that I say. It's all gonna say,
that's right.
yeah, yeah. It's a dumb insurance policy that people put out there on their own work, and it's. I teach arts-based methods at UMass, and I teach at the doctoral level, and then I teach an undergraduate version, and I teach
Mhm.
writing the undergraduate version, and I teach also studio methods for early childhood teachers. So I teach this whole class called "You Have Never Had Access to Art Materials Before." Let's experience this. Before you can teach art to 4-year-olds, you need to know art. So I teach all this heavy art content. And most of my students, the vast majority of which are young women, um, they apologize constantly for everything about their lives. They apologize
Mhm.
constantly. And I have this great big ruler, this like giant yardstick, like it says New York Department of Education. It's from like 1940. And I slam that thing on the table every time they say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I think this is really, it's just stop with it. Stop apologizing for existing. Like you have a
Yeah.
right to be imperfect and you have a right to put whatever you want out into the world, right? Have the entitlement of a mediocre white man and just put it out there, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
It's I also think that there's a real tendency for people to apologize for work that is vulnerable and close to the heart and close to what they feel.
Mhm.
Um, I do a lot of work that's very cute, right? My work is very cute. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I've done some dark stuff, sure, but most of my work is super cute with like little creatures and giant ears and like walking potatoes and little
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
say cute things. Because I believe like whimsy is the central construct of what, and I think that's what I wrote about for the piece for your collection. I wrote quite a bit about whimsy, right?
Hmm.
As an
Hmm.
organizing principle. And the revolution, right? So I do this work and it's very cute and it's very sweet and there's a lot of cute little things and there's a real pressure and certainly in the art world, which wants nothing to do with me, but also in the world of kind of visual media, that something cannot be of real value unless it is very serious and very hard. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of that is like some deep sexism around like how we masculinize certain ideas and how we devalue things that are considered childlike or womanly or whatever. So I
Hmm.
persist in producing this very cute scholarship, right? And I have this happy, cute little name, and I'm this very cute little happy person. But I think that the drive to apologize for that is located in the way in which we ourselves have been colonized by a very European masculinist narrative about what counts as knowledge and what counts as art. And when you
Hmm.
bring art and knowledge together in the way that we do with art space and comic space scholarship, that's a real trend that's happening. Sort of like the real comic space stuff is going to be heavy, it's going to be dark, it's going to evoke a certain period of comic art history, and it's not going to be like Maybelle Ikwe. I don't know if you know about her work with the little frogs. She's
Hmm. Hmm.
and like that kind of stuff, like that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm making sense, but I think that
Hmm.
in comic art there's a real, as it becomes, as comic space work in academia especially becomes more mainstream, and I don't have people stopping me in the hallway and calling my work cute and telling me to go find another job. um Although my work is cute, it is cute, but at the capital C, cute like Marx was cute. So there's a real drive, the real tendency, which is unfortunate, for the same neocolonial rhetoric that dominates so much of the way we do conventional prose scholarship in academia also.
Hmm.
And I think the more crazy, cute, vulnerable stuff we can put out there, the better, because that's going to go a long way to destabilizing the dominance of that narrative, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think the less gatekeeping that we
Yeah.
can do, the better. There's nothing wonderful or sacred about gatekeeping.
Mm-mm.
And I say that as someone that's experienced some of that in qualitative research of,
Yeah.
you put together all the things, all the ways that you worked hard to make sure that your work is reliable, consistent, valid, whatever word you want to use there. Even the word valid has problems.
That's,
Um, but and then to have someone come back and say, "Well, I still don't know if I can trust this." I'm
yeah.
going,
Like,
yeah,
can you not trust it because of what's there or because of who I am,
yeah,
what my
exactly.
name is, and how I appear, and what my voice sounds like, and where I'm from? Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And the bottom line is if the traditional approaches, if the colonial approaches had produced everything that we need as educators, as scholars, as thinkers, as living human beings, then I don't think people would be writing anymore. I think we would
No,
just be
we're like,
pointing back to
we've
the
solved knowledge. We can now
exact
go on. Yeah. Yeah. But think about how the academy has changed since, you know, when I first started doing this. Like my
Hmm.
very first semester at my very first job, I was pregnant with my first child. And I left in that March. I had the child and continued teaching
Mm.
this
Wow.
infant, first infant. And I remember at the end of the semester, people, my department, which was mostly men, said, "Oh, well, we've really enjoyed having you. It was so nice to have you here for this year." And I was like, "Where do you think I'm going?" And they assumed that because I had had a child, I would be quitting my job and staying home.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that was just their experience. It wasn't because they were bad people, but that was the context at the time. And this was 2005.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Not
now,
1950 something.
no. And so now I think we've moved on so much from that. And the academy and the world has become a platform for much more diverse participation, just
Hmm.
sort of in civic and intellectual life, that of course the knowledge sources and the way we talk about knowledge and the way we talk about it has to change, right? And comic art, contiguous words and images, does not cheat. It
Hmm.
can't.
Hmm.
It can't be. I think it's very difficult to produce work like that is not multi-layered and rich. It is not an Instagram reel. It requires commitment.
Yeah,
And I think that is
absolutely.
part of the answer to how we bridge that space between, all of us sitting around reading Derrida and pretending we know what we're talking about, to
Hmm.
something that's presents complex ideas in a way that is clear.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. But
Mhm.
as we're
No
coming,
shade on Derrida, by the way. Like I love me some
oh
Derrida,
no, 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 that
but the
it's
last
funny
part
that
was
you
like,
mentioned
oh
that.
yeah, yes.
I just thought about a presentation that I had to give as a first semester doc student on Derrida, and I found a graphic novel about Derrida for one thing.
Yeah, I love those.
Um,
Was it those for beginners series? Those were so
yes.
cool. Yeah, those were
Oh
cool.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and even so, I had to negotiate this place of being like, I'm talking about these very complex ideas, and I want to make them sound like something. I want to get to the root and not make it sound like something that a wise old man would say on a mountain that is
Mhm.
unattainable, which I think one of the students in the class was still sounds like a wise old man on a mountain, like yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I don't want to say canonical things have no use, but I think that the ideas that persist, and Derrida's ideas are some of those, persist
Hmm.
for a reason because of their sort of theoretical generality and also their application. But we still need to do the work of applying them in new and different ways, right? So
Absolutely.
we all have our favorites, right? But I remember reading student papers about where they were trying to deal with heavy theory because they thought it made them somehow legitimate. And these
Hmm.
papers, it was like reading Gertrude Stein. Like it made as much sense going forward as it did backward. And I just think this is not scholarship. This is not what we need to be doing. Like if it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to you, it won't make sense to anybody else.
Yeah. Well, and what helps you tell your story or the story that you're seeing around you that you want to tell? What are the ideas that
Why are you
afford
telling it?
that?
Why are
Hmm.
you telling it? And sometimes I really have something I want to communicate and I want to, burn down some houses and do some things. The piece I did, Wedges, for
Hmm.
health promotion practice, was definitely that piece. I wanted to draw the ugliest picture of Donald Trump I possibly could and hopefully let it be brought to his attention. That was my goal. So I had work I wanted to do and things I wanted to say, but sometimes it's just like solving a puzzle and I want to produce the document or produce the piece and have it speak and
Yeah.
just let it be out there. Yeah. But so people, what you're saying, why you're saying it, who you're saying it to is sometimes not nearly as important as simply solving the puzzle
Hmm.
of how
Yeah.
do I tell the story and how do I use images and bring myself to the fore and you know, what do I want people to feel when they read this? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in that way, art and research have so much in common because they're not separate realities, and people take them up and apply them and experience them, uh, and
Yeah.
carry them forward.
Right. And then you can get into a whole conversation about what is the purpose of art. My early childhood art students this spring were a wonderful, wonderful group. And I asked them to go to a place and they went there. And at
Hmm.
the end of the semester, they came with the idea that art is making a thing to express a thing
I like it.
and to explore a thing. And I like
Hmm.
that. I like that very much. And so much of scholarship is also making a thing to explore a thing or express a thing. It's just
Hmm.
what is the thing you make? And is the thing you make the primary objective or is it the process of making the thing?
True.
that drives you,
Very
right?
true.
Those are the big questions to ask about. I mean, and comic art is so product oriented. We spend so much time because it's highly representational that I think we sometimes forget that process work. And as scholars doing comics based research, the process is equally important. And that I think that slows us down. I think it makes the work, people want to produce kind of Marvel type comics, and you can't
Hmm.
really do that because so much of it is processual, I find.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have so much more to talk about. We could do a separate
I know we could be here
episode.
forever. For sure. Have I answered your questions? I feel like I've just like talked your ear off about my thoughts
No,
about
no,
art.
you're good. Actually, the best interviews are where I sort of just leave the questions over to the side and we have a conversation. The questions are just there to sort of be a support in case someone's nervous,
In
even
case
if
you
that
somebody
someone happens to be me.
who's not chatty. I'm very chatty. I'm from the
No,
South
I love it. I love it.
constantly.
Well, and
So
these are rich topics.
they're
So,
rich. There's a lot to say. There's always a lot to say, but I guess my advice to people, I always want people to try comic based art or try arts based research because I think that that's the revolution. If you're interested in arts based research, I recommend reading Melissa Conman Taylor, and
absolutely.
anything
Yeah.
by her. She has great pieces on what is quality art and science, right? Because you can't
And
just,
poetics.
yeah, you need to like pay attention to the standards of quality. It's very, very important. Even if, I mean, I don't care what you produce as long as your heart is in it and you're trying. But she has really great standards for that. I highly recommend anything Patricia Levy has produced.
Hmm.
That always really speaks in a really deeply vulnerable way, and I like her revolution quite a bit. Of course, you could read anything I've written. I have
And
all
please do visit the
I have all
website.
kinds of stuff. Come out, visit my website, sallypirie.com. It's all kinds of stuff there. And yeah, just keep a notebook and start drawing and paying attention to the world in that small radical way.
And don't apologize for it.
And Lord have mercy, do not apologize for your existence, especially people who are not represented well in the academy. When you apologize, you give away your power.
Amen.
Apologize
Amen.
if you step on someone's toe. Apologize if you hurt somebody, but don't apologize for existing or for making art. And check out Maybelle Equay on Instagram and her little frogs anytime you feel like you need to apologize because she will set you straight.
Love it. Love it.